Assalamu alaikum and welcome. I'm Aksha Tariq, one of the co-founders at LTech, and today I have with me two very experienced professionals, people I've had the pleasure of knowing and working with. And the reason why we wanted to sort of put this session together was to learn from, real life or real experiences of women who've been working in the field of science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics. As we say at LTech, our main idea is to build up women in teams, traditionally known as women in STEAM, but we've just sort of changed it around. So I'd like to welcome my guests for today, Priya Khokhar and Ayeshaw. So Priya is a project management professional with nearly 15 years of experience, and mostly she's been working in, I think, the health tech industry and also the gaming industry. She has some exciting projects up her sleeve as well. I'd like each one of you to quickly introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about the work that you're doing, and then we'll take a deep dive into your career roadmap.
Sure. Thank you so much for having us, Aksa. I really appreciate it. And I've had such a fabulous time collaborating with you and with LTech most recently with female tech leaders. So a little bit kind of what I'm doing currently. I've been at Rally Health, which is really the tech arm for United Health Group, which is a very large insurance health organization here in the US. And I've been working on the technical PMO side of the house. So started with them about 7 years ago and really helped grow the team from there. Have launched some of their early stage products and then really moved into scaling the organization in order to really operate at an enterprise level, which is at this point, over 3,000 people just at the Rally side. And then on the side, what Aksa and I have actually gotten to work on very closely together is kind of this coaching platform that was born during COVID. It's called Female Tech Leaders. It really started out with me having a desire to reach out to the community of women in Pakistan trying to break into tech, and really giving a different face to the opportunities that lie within tech, because I think oftentimes there's a fear of coming into this field because it is a very male-dominated field, but there are people like Ayeshaw and myself that have been in this industry for a long time, and really wanted to tell the stories of founders as well out of Pakistan, because it's a booming industry when it comes to the startup space. So really been working on that on the side, which has been very rewarding, quite honestly.
Thank you, Priya. So Ayeshaw, I'll have you introduce yourself. Tell us about the work that you've been doing. I think for any Pakistani, when they hear that, oh, we know someone who works at Google or YouTube, it's like the ultimate. I think that cool thing to talk about. But yeah, we'd love to hear about your journey from back to like college to now.
Yeah. So I did high school in Pakistan. I'm Ayeshaw Khan. I'm currently a product manager at YouTube, specifically for the music business. And I've been at Google for the past 6 years. I joined after business school. I was in a business role, and then I transitioned to product management, which is a fairly standard role in the tech community. And at Google, it's a little bit technical. And my engineering background helped. So I have an electrical engineering undergrad and grad school degree from Northwestern in Chicago. So that really helps. So I've always been very passionate about STEM. I'm involved with Build for Girls in the US, and also coach, a lot of women outside of work as well to help them get into tech and specifically in product management. So my journey was that, when I was in school in Pakistan, I went to KGS. I just liked the sciences. So I was pre-engineering, did not want to do pre-med. So I did pre-engineering. And then I came to Northwestern as an engineering student. And then I chose electrical engineering because I liked building stuff. I did computer science and hardware stuff. And then I joined consulting at Accenture. So I did tech consulting. Then I did a startup. It was right before the fintech bubble. Sorry, not the fintech, the financial crisis in 2007. So I did a startup in HR. It was super, super fun. I can talk a lot about that as well. But the timing wasn't right for the market. So it didn't go anywhere. And then I went to business school for 2 years. And then I joined tech because my calling was always tech. So I took a lot of learnings from consulting and my startup and brought it to tech. And I hope to get back into startups after 1 or 2 years from doing my stint at Google.
Well, yeah, I think as Priya rightly said, there's a lot of stuff happening even back in Pakistan. You guys are familiar with the ecosystem here, and it's fairly new, I would say. but there's been a lot of buzz and there's been a lot of like good kind of noise. So what I wanted to sort of, take the conversation towards today is that both of you, have been working in diverse fields, but also in developing products and managing, different portfolios. I'd like to understand the science of this social media influence, and the reason why I ask this is because this is something that's constantly changing, and I think all of us have seen this evolve in front of us. I mean, there was a time when Snapchat was it, then there was TikTok, which is now it, and then tomorrow we don't know what's to come, right? And that's what happens with the pace. I think back then, I think it used to be obviously just MySpace and Orkut and a couple of others, and a lot of things have obviously changed in the social media landscape. So when we're talking about product management, when we're talking about product development, how do you cut through all that noise in this world of product development today? And either of you can take this up. Yeah. First.
Yeah, I think to your point, right? Like it evolves over time. I think back to when Facebook had launched. Most of us were in college, and so you had to have a .edu to join it. And my first real gaming gig was with Zynga, and I was the art producer on Farmville. And I remember it just being this phenomenon where social connection and social media was really kind of at the precipice of something massive happening. Twitter was around, but it wasn't the sort of connection and meaningful work that was happening on Facebook at the time. Fast forward 15 years, you have an Instagram and you've got a Snapchat and whatnot. So the landscape continues to change, but I think the baseline has stayed the same, which is that there's a need in this new generation for constant gratification, instant gratification, as well as a connection that isn't necessarily human-based. There's a lot larger appetite for being digital, for being online. Now, in the health tech space, quite honestly, we don't rely so much on what's happening on social media, right? Because we're very regulated in terms of what we're able to do. But what I can speak to is just as a consumer even, the impact that social media has had in terms of just the way products are developed. When you're in product development, you're looking a lot at data and what the market's telling you, and your users are going to tell you what they're doing, right? Like, so in any of those roles, you're really relying on, what's your top of funnel? How are people reacting to the products that you're putting out there? But then even just as a consumer, the landscape's very clear to you. And I feel like today content creation has become something anyone can do because the market is extremely large and there's a big appetite. So really the traditional sense of product development has gone away a little bit. Of course, you've got people like Ayeshaw or myself that are working in the more corporate tech space. But there are full functioning businesses that are operating on social media today. And I think that that's a product development phenomenon that we didn't have 15 years ago. So I think it's a really fascinating time to be in like tech product development, especially.
So I'll add, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I was going to add two things just because it's very relevant. So I run a team which focuses mostly on younger consumers like Gen Z, and it's a little bit experimental group. So it's interesting because there are two things. One is you can't cut through the noise. Every day there is something going on with a new competitor launching. It's always about how do we differentiate ourselves from them, or how do we actually get a seat on the table in terms of parity features. So as you know, TikTok came first, then YouTube launched their shorts, and there are also other businesses which are launching similar features. So it's always about like, how do you move fast in the business? So it's not traditional product development because I might have a roadmap of what I want to build, in the next 2 to 3 years. But in this business, it's like, what are you building in the next quarter and the next 2 quarters? And how can you be nimble in your product roadmap? Second one is social media has a strong influence on when we launch products because it gets picked up and you get a lot of like negative feedback, positive feedback. So we are a lot about like what goes on social, what goes on, press releases. So we work closely with that as a product manager because we want to keep pulse of, we want positive news in the press. But when things get picked up pretty quickly, someone tweets, I have to go fix something which is not working. Yeah. So it's become like I would say the feedback loop between customer has become much shorter because of social media, right? Especially for consumer products.
100%. It's actually,
Yeah, and then how does it reflect on your day-to-day work? Because that's something like, and as Priya had said, instant gratification. They need it then and there. There's no holdback, and then you can't go through like three different kinds of channels.
Yes, go ahead, Priya.
Yeah, I think again in the health tech space, it takes us a little bit longer to respond, but we do have some products that are very consumer focused, especially like our coaching platform. And yes, they use Twitter sometimes when they file it with CS, and it's been a week, and CS it's in our queue, right? Like we're waiting and we're working on a product to get the fix out, or the release hasn't gone out as yet, and they'll sometimes tweet at us, and at that moment it really becomes a PR issue. Like how many followers does this person have, how many hashtags have they used, are those hashtags trending or not, how many people are going to look at it, what's the impact on the brand that you're representing, do you need to react to that? So that's a completely new thing that our CS teams especially have to deal with, and there's a strong partnership between those teams and product delivery at this point, where sometimes there is a day-to-day impact. Does it happen very often? Not for us, but it might be different. Ayeshaw, in your space in YouTube, especially.
Yeah. You're always like something or the other is always happening.
Right.
So I think there, like I would say to Aksa's point as well, it's a balance between core product development, which is like the long-term goal, and then there you have to have space for short-term, when you respond to a certain thing, or you want to make sure that you're innovating fast enough. So there's a balance on your, how you think about your product development space.
Yeah, and I think that's really evolved, because I think back then, back in the day, like actually not even many years ago, we used to have, I think, a lot of that customer feedback or feedback forms, or send this in and we'll do a review, and then obviously all of that process has been cut into the Twitter characters, or like 160 characters is it. That's like your lifeline for your product. I'd like to ask both of you, about your own journey, and how how you would identify, or say that what does it take to get where you are today. And the reason why I ask this is that LTech, we're really sort of passionate about telling young girls about the career opportunities that they have. We've seen, and the reason why we bring in people like you are because these are real role models. We don't want them to think that this is something that they cannot achieve, that this is something that they cannot build. Priya, something that you said, that about building, or about constantly sort of being up to date with what's happening around in the world. And I think the world is now, when we started LTech, we thought, yeah, we know a couple of hundred women, who are doing fantastic stuff in tech, so let's put this together. But our mind was blown away by the kind of work Pakistani women have been doing across the globe. You talk about genome technology, you talk about nanotechnology, so there's absolutely no field that's been left like untouched or like uncovered. So from both of you, how's that journey been for you, and what do you have to say about younger girls who are looking to sort of explore different fields in tech?
Yeah, I could write a thesis on this. It's a topic very near and dear to me. In terms of my journey, it was not a traditional journey. It wasn't a journey where, in school I was definitely not inclined towards the sciences, let alone tech. I was awful at math. I don't think there was a very high bar, honestly, set for me for being successful, if I'm being honest. And it's because I thought a little bit outside the box, and I really challenged authority a lot. So my journey was very different. I was in college. I had moved to Berkeley, and while I was in school, I was working part-time for a German tech startup. And this is pre-Spotify. And we were bringing radio stations onto Symbian Nokia phones. So I'm really aging myself. This is like pre-iPhone. And while I was working for them, they made me a full-time offer. And it was an offer I just couldn't say no to. I was 21. And I decided to drop out of school. And I have never looked back. That just started something for me. It was this passion for this space that I wasn't exposed to growing up in Pakistan, honestly. Like I didn't know tech was even a thing. I was too young really at that time to have a sense of it. And from there, it was just one thing after the other, which was going into a company like Zynga that IPO'd. I went and did a couple of startups. From there, I ended up at Rally Health, which was a startup, which has now been acquired by United. And through that journey, there's a few things that I feel have really been at the heart of what's been allowed me to be successful, really. I think one is grit. Like there's just no substitute for that, right? Especially when you are on a little bit of a back foot. I'm a 4'11" Pakistani woman with a strong accent, right? Like, and no college degree. So when I would walk into rooms, it wasn't necessarily the first thing they would think of was, oh, this is a woman who should be in a leadership role, right? So really having to persevere through your own imposter syndrome and being like, faith in yourself and going with your gut and knowing like it's going to take a lot of work, and it does. You have to really bust your hump, but it does pay off. So I think that's the first thing. I think the second thing is finding the right mentors and surrounding yourself with the right sort of people. And that goes for men or women, right? I have some of my most influential mentors are actually men, but they're allies and they are cognizant of the fact that it's actually very hard for women that look like us to make it in a fairly male-dominated industry here in the US, especially in the Valley, right? There's just not a lot of female CEOs, not a lot of women in the C-suite. So really finding the right mentors that you can learn different things for. So I've always relied on a very heavy network of mentors to kind of see me through that. And I think the third is just always learning, right? Like there's always something you can learn from someone, and there's always something you can teach because all of us have different experiences. So staying open to that, I often walk into like meetings and say, I'm probably going to ask a couple of dumb questions because I don't know all the answers. And so having that vulnerability allows people to feel comfortable with you, and then they want to help you, and then you can connect on a more human level. And so for me, that has worked really well. So those are really the three things that I kind of keep at the heart of my journey and how I continue.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, sure.
I think so. It's interesting because it's good to have Priya and me both because I have the more traditional background, right? Like from the beginning, when I was growing up in Pakistan, like, you know, kids would play with Barbies. I was playing with G.I. Joe and Terminator. So that's it. You know, my name is like inspired by George Bernard Shaw. My dad wanted me to be a writer. I used to write, and then I said, Dad, I actually like math. So it was like a thing. And then I, you know, chose, you know, sciences, and I chose engineering, pre-engineering at A levels. More straightforward, came to the US in a general program, and then you kind of choose what you like, right? If you want to do biomed or if you want to do electrical engineering or computer science. You know, when I was in school, computer science used to be in the liberal arts college, so it was different, and the electrical engineering was different, and I like to build stuff. So like I built a robot and solar car. So it was different. Now they're bringing it back, right? There's, again, hardware, software goes hand in hand. So I wish I took more CS classes than I did. And then I was asked to be part of a combined master's bachelor's program. So I was in this combined program, and I was running Society of Women Engineers. Like I was in the leadership position, and then I was asked to join Accenture. So for me, it was like I was pulled into a consulting job in tech at Accenture through this Society of Women Engineers thing I was running at the national level. And I always liked tech. So I was in consulting, and if I was in Berkeley or on the West Coast, I would have been in tech directly. But Chicago is a little bit further away. So it was mostly consulting and banking, pulling kids there, right? I have a few friends who joined tech. So when I was there, I enjoyed working, but I knew I wanted to do startup. Like, you know, they're friends of mine in the Valley. I think Priya knows some of them. And I was like, okay, I'll do a startup. And it was the right time for me personally. But I think just from the market perspective, because the financial crisis was just happening, it wasn't the best time. So yeah, so I did consulting. I went to business school. And I think at any given point in time, the exercise always has been like, what do I want to do in the next like couple of years and long term? But the exercise which helps me is what skills I have today and what skills I want to acquire, right? So when I actually did the startup, I realized I actually don't have really good business sense. I come from a very technical background. So like raising money or like actually understanding like the equity structure, some people learn on the job. I love learning from school. And it was a natural thing for me to learn about like finance and marketing and all of that outside of the tech world. So I then ended up going to business school, and that's where I learned a lot of things. I was actively involved in startups. I did a private equity internship, which was mostly growth strategy. It was similar to a VC. So I learned a lot, and quickly I realized I actually want to be on the tech side. Although there was a lot of there's always herd mentality, like, what do you want to do? And everyone again was going into like other fields. No one was going into tech. And I said, actually, I want to go back to tech, and I will not take my job offer. So I actually moved back to the US and I had a job offer at a startup, and then at Google as well. So I kind of chose Google over a startup. There's no right and wrong when it comes to tech. Like, I can now go to startup, or I could have gone to startup and gone to Google. It was just about the right role and the right fit. But clearly for me, it's always also the second thing Priya was saying is about mentors, finding the right people. So I would love to introduce people, Aksa, specifically to, I know Pakistani women, we are only a few hundred at Google. People who are engineers, people who've done UX designers from around the world who've come to Google, come to the US, and you'll be surprised. I know guys from GIK, like, people have done so much to come here, and now the community is trying to help each other. There's one woman I look up to. She studied from Karachi University, and now, she's one of senior directors or VPs at Google now, and she's Pakistani, and she's from University of Karachi from back in the day, right? So it's like inspirational, inspiring stories like that when you meet people, who've come a long way, less traditional backgrounds than me. So yeah, that's my journey. And like, I continue, my passion is still startup, and I would either join or a couple of years do one myself. But at Google, like, you learn a lot from people, and I continue to learn. And also, like, product development was not something which was a direct role from business school. Like, it wasn't talked about. So when I came at Google, I was in a business role. And then in order to transfer, you have to go through the interview process similar to when you're coming from outside Google. And they have a technical. So Facebook and Google have technical interviews as well to make sure you're technically sound. And I can talk more about that as well. And other, like, companies like Amazon is more business focused PMs.
Yeah. I'd like both of you to talk a little bit about the skills gap side of things. As I was saying even offline, that we've seen a lot of girls sort of hesitant to the idea of venturing into fields which are otherwise, of course, dominated by men, or like are a bit scary or intimidating at first, and also because of the kind of options that may be limited, at least in Pakistan. It's only recently that we have a lot of like programs on safe cybersecurity, or programs on like nanotechnology or biotech or agri-tech, for example. What's your opinion, or what do you think is are some of the things that they should be looking at right now, when we're talking about the skills gap side of things?
Yeah, I think one, in today's very online digital world, you have access to so many online boot camps and programs and communities where you can kind of learn from peers and other folks. And I do understand that, we talk about these boot camps, but they can get pretty expensive, so it really depends where you're placed in your career, in the country, in the world. Are you working at a company that will support that? And what's worked in my group, and I speak from a very US-based company perspective, but I think Pakistani startups actually do have an appetite for this, because a lot of the founders are, have worked at companies here and are aware of kind of how we operate, is creating a development plan. So really going to your manager, it's on you to go to whoever you're working with and saying, look, I have a skill gap here. I want to get to the next level. I have found an online course. Will the company subsidize some of this for me? And more often than not, they will actually, help you out with that, because you're making a commitment to the company as well, that you want to kind of improve your skill sets to be able to give back to the organization. So I think that's one thing. I think the second is really learning on the job, right? So for me, a lot of it has been that. Some of it has been making mistakes and learning. And then the second has been not just doing the job that I'm doing, but then volunteering to do work that I've never done before. Product management, for example. Never formally trained as a product manager, have run program management organizations. But I could stub in for a product manager at this point, because when we've been in a pinch, I've said, I'll write a spec, I'll write the tickets for this. So it's really like finding those opportunities. And again, the people that you're surrounded with, and finding the people that'll kind of help show you and guide you how to navigate some of this stuff. And then there's, of course, the more traditional route, right? Like if you have the means, you have the ability, you can take a gap while you're working, is to go back to school. You know, I am a big advocate for that. It's not the journey that I took necessarily, but there is a lot to be said for the sort of training that you can get with programs within a school atmosphere. So those would be kind of the three things that I have found to be useful.
So yeah. I would say being in tech, I've seen all sorts of people, you know, engineers and in product management. I think it's okay to come from a non-traditional background, just doing a boot camp. There's also actually a few boot camps where they sponsor, you know, they subsidize it for you and you can actually work for them afterwards. So I think that's really like becoming a hot thing. There's also remote work now. So you could be from Pakistan, but you could actually get remote work that you could do. I think it's like just finding your passion. And I feel like if you connect to the right people, people can guide you. Even in the US, in a lot of newer fields like crypto as well, there are fewer women, but they also are trying to find the way, right? Like I'll join Clubhouse in the right rooms and start to see, oh, what's happening for NFTs, for like music or art and things like that. So there's just like with social media as well, there's so much ways that if you know, tweet at someone, it's like, hey, I want to have a conversation. People are very open about it. So it's more about like being more open-minded that tech is now fluid around the world. You don't need traditional degrees. Even for product management, for me, they always say just learn on the job. Like I've learned on the job and, you know, I actually just studied online and then kind of just gave my interviews. So there's a lot of resources online. And I feel like for women in Pakistan, if you're passionate about it, I think the sky is the limit. I would totally say that. It's about like, do you really want to do it for the right reasons? Because there is an upfront investment in learning, right? Because it is a little bit technical, right? And you could be a UX designer. I worked with a female UX designer from Pakistan. She was amazing, but you have to be on top of the right technologies as they're moving forward, right? Like you want to make sure you're on the right, like, you know, computer science technologies, whichever one you're using, you know, right on top of that as well. So
I think that I'd like to sort of circle this back to what Priya had said about, you know, constantly sort of learning and constantly updating your skills, your skill set, of course, because that's something a lot of times, I mean, we used to hear this back in college also, that a lot of things that you've learned in college will actually be redundant by the time you graduate.
It's redundant, yeah.
As Ayeshaw, as you rightly said, you know, most of the stuff, like we all learn it on the job. You know, we're literally Googling on how to do stuff when like some project. And I think that happens to all of us. So I think that's one thing that you know has obviously helped a lot, because there's so much content, material, resources, even people available. And I think COVID has sort of also made that case easier, and people are more and more approachable, I think, and are open to sort of giving back. And there's something that I always say, that I think Pakistanis also have this great sense of giving back. You know, a lot of people think the opposite, but I actually think that, you know, people who've been abroad or have been working outside of Pakistan have a great passion of giving back to community in whatever sense they can, you know, whether it's mentoring students, youngsters, you know, coaching them in various fields. I know that both of you are also involved in a lot of these voluntary activities. Tell us more about it. So Ayeshaw, we'll start with you. I think you were talking about some of the mentorship that you've done.
Yeah, there's a program in the US which is called Build by Girls or for Girls. It's around like they find young women who are interested in STEM. So I work with like girls in high school. And it's the same, like what I want to say, like, you know, I have taught even in Pakistan, like, you know, outside of work and outside of school, and even in America, I was part of Chicago Cares. One theme I see across the board is the problems in Pakistan and in the US are very similar. Like the woman will still say, like, I am not comfortable being in a tech dominated industry. I don't know how to get mentorship. And these are people in like, you know, even in California. So the problems are the same, right? Like guidance is very important. And I feel like when you're really young, you're very impressionable. You need to find the right network, to find the right mentors to guide you. So I think that's one program that I'm involved with. There's other programs which are around product management, not formal stuff that I do. And then I'm also starting to get involved with like the care schools, which is something in Pakistan. I used to be involved in like Dil schools and like a lot of other stuff, but I'm ramping back up to be involved in more of those things, right? So care schools are doing really well. And what I try to do is like get them, you know, how can Google support them as one of the nonprofits? It's a process, so I'm going to try to do that and things like that. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah, and for me, really, it's such a new thing. I'm not gonna lie. Up until recently, I've been either having children or I've been pregnant. So I've kind of had a little bit of a juggling act happening the last 4 years or so. But during COVID, really, I wasn't commuting 3 hours a day, so it created some space in my life where I had time, and that's where Female Tech Leaders was born. It's a completely grassroots, homemade platform where I started really interviewing founders from Pakistan to tell their stories. A lot of female founders and the amazing work they're doing there, some VCs out of Pakistan, and then also mentoring and formally coaching women that reach out to me through that platform and say, hey, I'm in the midst of an interview. Can you help me with some of the technical questions that I might get? How do I actually go through an interview? Hey, I'm applying for jobs. I'm going to send you my resume. Can you help me tweak that? All the way to I have an offer. How do I negotiate this? And that's one of the hardest things as women is that we don't self-advocate very well. And there's a lot of imposter syndrome of feeling that and I still have it. I'm 15 years into this career and I still have imposter syndrome where I'm like, have they made a mistake? What's happening right now? And I think working through that is just such a generational systemic thing. And so I put a lot of focus on that of like your self-worth and your worthiness. And the fact, and I think for me, that's an important part of my journey is that you don't have to fit a mold to be successful in tech. I was a non-technical, not inclined towards, studies as such, really wanted to really be a lawyer when I was younger. That kind of made my way into this space. And what I've realized now is that there's so many women that look like me that are in very senior leadership roles, and it's great. So that's really what the work that I'm doing is. A lot of it is around just your self-awareness and finding the confidence within yourself to put yourself forward, because you probably have the skill sets and you're probably qualified for the job. It's a matter of finding it within yourself to put your name in there.
Yeah, and I think diversity and inclusion, I think, is really like a journey. And as you said that it's taken us a while and to accept that even the kind of fields or the options that are working in tech doesn't necessarily mean that you are building a product, or whether it's like hardware software that you're doing. There's a lot that goes on, and even in terms of getting the word out about so whether it's marketing that tech product, whether it's and I think more and more of that integration is now sort of available for us to understand and easier to absorb as well, that the options that we have in terms of what all we can do in tech, I think it's opened up huge opportunities. So right now I think we're not really in the final stage of our destination to diversity and inclusion. But if I were to ask you, what is it that people, organizations or allies can do today to help make that progress better for Pakistani women in STEAM?
That's it. It's an interesting question. This double-edged sword there, right? Because I think with anything with diversity, equity, inclusion is you want there to be an equal playing field. And that's not just for Pakistani women, that's for any group that's marginalized, right? And the sort of opportunities that they get. I think one thing is there's a sense in the tech community that I've picked up, at least, and I could be off, is that women that have been doing this longer than say even me and Ayeshaw have been, that they had it really rough. They went through some really tough times to get to where they are. So there's a sense of that, well, you have it so much easier, you're entitled. And I think breaking that down is what real allyship looks like. The times were different. Thank you for your service. Thank you for the work that you've done. But now let's lift each other up. Now let's create space for there to be a seat at the table for 20 Priyas. Why is there still only one, right? And I think that's where the important work is for Pakistani women, is really learning to support each other. And if you see an opportunity, bringing the woman behind you along more than anything else. And then I think for the men, I can't speak so much to like Pakistani men, so I haven't really worked in that ecosystem as much. But over here, what I appreciate a lot is when you see something, say something. if you see misogyny, if you see that the only woman in the group is being asked to order cupcakes for a birthday, say something. If you see somebody re-representing a woman's idea as their own, and you are a man that says he's an ally, say something. Even if it means you're going to make this other man annoyed or like peeved off at you, that's where real allyship comes in, is making yourself uncomfortable. And the more that you do that, those conversations just become easier. So those are two things I feel that for me have been very helpful is, and this has actually happened where I've been the only woman in a group and I've been asked to order cupcakes. And one of my male counterparts was like, I'm curious why is Priya always asked? I was like, thank you. You know, like that really helps. I've never ordered cupcakes again, you know. So it's subtle things like that that I think really help.
Yeah. I mean, I plus one to what Priya said. I think at Google, diversity, equity, inclusion is quite big, right? We have very dedicated forums. So one, from the people side, we've done a lot of things, including trainings. We have this unconscious bias training, because at the end of the day, like, people have biases, right? And I mean, you know, Pakistan and its, you know, reputation as well, but we have groups, like, so when things happen, for example, the San Bernardino thing happened, whenever there's an event which happens, the Pakistanis come together to talk about it and then basically figure out how is it best to communicate to people at Google and beyond. So we do, and we've done a lot around like hiring people to do. So like as me, I actually refer Pakistani people more, and each one of us have gotten people into Google. So supporting each other overall to bringing people in is important for us, right? And it's not like we are trying to change the game. We're just trying to get a level playing field for minorities as well. So it kind of is in line with the diversity, inclusion, and equity things Google is doing. And secondly is also like when we build products, we have very dedicated things that I have to look at when I'm looking into my machine learning algorithms. So it's becoming a very formal thing at Google. Yeah. Because it's quite biased, right? And everyone knows that. I'm not just saying it. And they're actually doing efforts. It's not easy, right? Imagine lots of data has been a certain way on Google search or on YouTube. How do you actually pivot it to be fair? But at least addressing it now and having metrics against it would actually help long term. So both from hiring and people perspective, it's a long way. I'm not going to lie that it's going to be fixed in a day. And also from a product and engineering perspective, we're also trying to change that. But it's about, last thing I want to say is like Pakistani people supporting each other, bringing them in a positive light, right, in the world. And then also providing mentorship and network to provide the right opportunity. I think Pakistani women are very talented. It's like, how do you give them the confidence, right? And I talk to my cousins in high school as well. It's just like you have this imposter syndrome. We still have it this age. You know, I've taken a lot of classes on it. But it's also like when I work with male counterparts, this is true based on research. Even if they know something, only 50% of it, they'll say it with super confidence. I would be like 80 to 90, 100% I need to know before I can say it with confidence, right? I see it every day, the differences between male and women leadership, how we work. So it's across, it's just not Pakistani women. We just need to overcome that and normalize it, right? And then I love Priya's thing of like, I am very big on normalizing behavior. Like if you see someone, you know, doing something which is not appropriate, like asking Priya to order cupcakes, call it out. We can't normalize bad behavior or like unequal behavior, whatever you want to call it. Yeah. And it happens everywhere, like outside work, at work, in tech, non-tech. It's just women need to just step up. Pakistani women or any woman, like any sort of thing needs to be voiced and not normalized.
Absolutely, and I think we're seeing a change. Although I do think it's a bit slow, but I think we're seeing that change now. You know, my last question to both of you would be, you know, what is it in like, you know, the work that you're doing? How has that sort of shaped you as a person or as an individual? And I usually get like really interesting responses here because you know, it's non-tech and it's I think conventional. But yeah, like the work that you're doing, what kind of social impact do you wish that it has, and that you're trying to make also?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I think I wouldn't say the work that I'm just doing right now. I think my career graph has highlighted a couple of things for me. I think the first is, I was in the free-to-play gaming space when Zynga was kind of a booming business, and they still are doing very well. But I think there was a social responsibility aspect of it, that because it was such a young, new organization, that wasn't taken into consideration. As I look back and reflect on that part of my career, it's something that I pay a little bit more attention to, is what is the negative social impact that this can have on us as a society, because there was a lot of addiction that was created by these games. There was a lot of people that went into debt because of these games, and because it was such again, instant gratificational loop. So I think I'm a little bit more conscientious of that. And it's the same coming into health tech. I think in health tech, I really didn't realize that I wanted to be mission driven, but Rally has been such a mission driven organization with like a positive impact on people's health, especially in the sort of healthcare system that the US has, which is very complicated and not the most fair system, frankly. As a person, what that's done for me is I've realized that social justice, social equality, and activism is really something that's very important to me. And it's through these experiences of mine that I've kind of realized that. So I'm learning to give more of my time to causes that are important to me. And it also reflects in the way that you live your life and lead your life and what you teach your children. So for me, like my children need to know, because I see the inequality in tech, right? The way women are treated. So I have 2 boys. I have to make sure that, that getting a very well-rounded perspective of what women have to offer this world, what people of color have to offer this world, what it means to be a minority and how to kind of break through those barriers. So it's had actually a very profound impact on me. And sometimes the lines get blurred between the professional that is me and the person at home. But I think that happens to a lot of people where, especially in this very global ecosystem that we live in, you really kind of merge those 2 things together. So I would say those are kind of the big things.
Yeah.
I think, sorry, Aksa, can you repeat the question?
Yeah, so my question was basically all the work that you've been doing, or your own career. What kind of like social impact do you wish that it makes, and how has that sort of also shaped you as a person?
Yeah, I think I always cared about social impact, especially like when it comes to STEM. And I've mostly had focused on like education and STEM, like boys or girls, irrespectively. And then other one is like more around women empowerment. But I've done most of my work outside of my work, specifically because when I was in consulting, when I was doing a startup, I did pivot the platform into education for a way to connect people to learn different things. And that was many years ago. But one thing I've learned throughout my career is like, you can have impact directly from work or outside of work, but it's about what things are important to you and what do you stand by, right? So at Google, I'm involved with stuff at Google when I provide mentorship, but I also do stuff outside because I feel not everyone has the opportunity outside of Google. But I learn a lot of things from work, specifically at Google, because they care about things differently. Like, although, media might say other things, I think they care about people. Like what I learned as a leader at Google is how do I think about my team's mental health, each one of them, right? Specifically, before COVID, after COVID, it's even more important. Like people are individuals, right? You have to be empathetic, and empathy doesn't always come up as a leadership trait. And I think that's something I learned, and I want to practice that. And self-awareness, right? People come with different things to work. They bring a lot of things to work, they can't leave themselves behind and come to work, right? They're not a robot. So I think that was my main thing as I worked at Google as well, is like, how do you become a more empathetic leader and think about things beyond just work, which I think is important also. Like in Pakistan specifically, there's like, there's so much happening all the time. And like now I think it's becoming important that mental health is important as well.
Yeah.
I just want to +1 to that. I think I love, Ayeshaw, that you call that out, because I think even as a very woke society in the US, we often forget the impacts of the importance of mental health. And I do think that has to be at the heart of of your leadership style is servant leadership, and really creating space for your people to be people. Because at the end of the day, there's like a whole life that this person's bringing with them into any experience. And I love actually that in the recent years, I've seen this huge pivot in Pakistan where there is so much mental health awareness. There are young men and women that are talking about being in therapy, that are talking about the difficulties of existing in that sort of society and the sort of challenges that they have, and then normalizing it. I love it. I have, many nephews and nieces that are like, yeah, it's fine if you're in therapy. I love that because the earlier that starts, the more likely you are to have empathy built into the fabric of your being versus it being forced into you in your 20s and you're like, wait, what does that mean, empathy? So yeah, I love that you brought that up, Ayeshaw.
Yeah, and I think I always say this, that it shouldn't really have taken a pandemic for us to realize that at every organization, it shouldn't have been business first and people second. I think that's one thing that a lot of businesses have suffered because of in the last 1 year or 1.5 years actually. That everyone who's put their business I think ahead of their people, I think they've suffered and they've realized, I think so that narrative has changed, I think, in Pakistan, and I hope that we're on to a better path. With that, ladies, I'd just like to ask if there's any closing comment, and then we'll close.
Thank you, Aksa, for this opportunity. And I would love to help in any way you want to help women in Pakistan. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Yeah, this was so wonderful. Thank you so much. And I think it's hilarious that Ayeshaw and I have met 4 years ago. And when I saw her name, I was like, hold on, I know you. So thank you for creating this platform and allowing us to come together and kind of reconnecting. And I love the work that you're doing. So please continue to do that.
Yeah.
I would love to be involved and support you in any way.
Very proud of you, Aksa.
Thank you so much. Hafiz.
Hafiz.